sponsor of TWSR with Sanctuary Financial Services, and last week we spoke about income and the lack of returns last month, and ways to improve your income. And this month, as part of your comprehensive financial planning arrangement, we're going to be talking about estate planning, Michael. Tell me a little bit, when we use these words, estate planning, what are we actually talking about?
Look, I think it's more than just setting up a will and constructing a will. With estate planning, I guess the simple thing is getting the right assets to the right people at the right time. You know, people build up their assets over a lifetime, and having a very comprehensive and a well-structured estate plan really enables their wishes to be adhered to when they do pass on, at some point in the future.
Yeah. I suppose it's one of those terrible things that if people do die intestate, it can create significant problems for them financially, can't it? It's not a nice path to be walking down.
Look, absolutely, but not only that, we can put a really good comprehensive plan together, but if the estate planning, if the will and the construction of the estate plan within their financial plan is not done properly, then that can also generate quite a lot of problems as well. So I think they certainly work hand in hand together.
Okay, so where do you actually see estate planning actually falling within an overall financial plan? Well, is that pretty much something that you really should be thinking about right at the very, very start of your actual planning?
Look, I think it's part of an overall comprehensive plan. Yeah. Not only do you get the basics and the investments, the insurance and so forth in place, but that can all come completely unstuck if your estate planning is not looked at and certainly considered and investigated at the same time.
Yeah. Now, there's probably many ways that people can go about that, and there's many ways that people do go about this, but in harsh reality, there's really only one way that you should be doing something like this. Is it a case that you see a financial planner? Is it a case that you see a solicitor? Or is it a case that you try and do it yourself?
Look, I've seen a number of different methods. Financial planners don't do wills, but certainly we're here to, I guess, investigate and look at a person's situation. We identify problems. So if we see issues and problems within a person's financial affairs, we certainly identify those problems. And what we consider, particularly at Sanctuary Financial Services, to prepare a brief or a document for the client, where they can then take it to their solicitor and certainly discuss that with their solicitor. And I found that I think you really need to look at a specialist in that area as well. We've dealt with solicitors before in the past, or clients have, where we've given a client a brief and the solicitor just hasn't been able to deal with it because they don't specialise in that area. Hence the reason why we use certainly a few really top-line solicitors that...
I gather that you're one of those specialists in estate planning, and I mean, from a legal perspective, what do you see as being some of the key involvements that are involved with estate planning?
Yeah, it's a good question, Bob. I might refer back to your previous question in terms of where do you see the financial planners and lawyers sitting together first. And I think the ideal scenario is when we work in conjunction with each other. I see the financial planner's job as building the pie, building up the wealth for the client. My job is to ensure that when that pie is cut up, the slices go where you want them to, and that if there's an issue with any potential beneficiaries, with the tax office, with family law problems, all of those kind of things, we can put in place structures around those.
Right. I suppose because people's financial circumstances do change, and people may find that they get an inheritance or something of the like, it actually does then change maybe the composition of what's involved with their financial plan, and then once again maybe the type of advice that you may be wanting to give forward in terms of the structure of what they should do.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm seeing more and more of. Life is more complicated for people these days.
Yeah.
We have second marriages, we have people who have external entities like family trusts or companies. Self-managed super funds are becoming more and more popular. What a lot of people don't realise is those external entities are not automatically covered by your will. So your superannuation, which people like Michael will assist you in putting as much money as you can into super because it's so tax effective for you when you retire, when you pass away or when there's an incapacity event, that is not automatically covered by your standard estate planning documents like a basic will or a power of attorney. So it's vitally important that not only do you have a will, but you have a full estate plan that reflects your current wishes. I see a lot of clients come in and they say to me, I've got a will, and I say, well, how old is it? And they say, well, it's 17 years old. Our kids have come and gone from our life since then, and we've got super funds, we've got family trust, we've got this, we've got that. I'm actually in my second marriage, and
Yes.
life is very different for them. So if you can at least try and keep your estate plan up to date, it'll make a huge difference.
Yeah. I mean, the harsh reality, we all tend to think that once we've got a will in place, that will is relatively current, and whilst it is still a current document, it may not be really current to your own particular circumstances at that time. So it is vitally important that you actually do sit back and reflect upon something like that.
Yeah, it's extremely important. I'll give you an example of a client we had. She had been separated from her husband for 17 years. They were never divorced, as was their way, but they hadn't been in contact for 15 odd years. She unfortunately didn't get great advice with her estate planning, and what happened was that the husband came in to see us and he said, look, I've got all this money from super, from my wife. We said, well, what's the situation? Separated 15 years. The thing was, she was in a super fund that provided that everything automatically went to the spouse.
Right.
Because he was still married and wasn't divorced, everything went to him. Now, we know her intention would have been to leave it through to her children,
Yeah.
but because she didn't have a current and effective estate plan, that unfortunately didn't happen. And we're talking, a few $100,000 in superannuation here that's gone through to someone who, let's be frank, if you've been separated for 15 years, is probably not a most popular person in her eyes.
Yeah. Now tell me, it seems to me that just in what you're saying, and Michael, what you're saying, that it's vitally important that there be some degree of synergy in these discussions, both between a financial planner and between a person that's well versed in the many complications that you can find in estate planning. And so it's really getting that, I suppose, marriage together of two professionals to make sure that you've really got that comprehensive plan in place.
Yeah, well, what we do, and quite often I've spoken with Simon in the past, where I have a client in the office and we're putting a financial plan together, and I'll give Simon a call and actually ask, some questions in relation to that when I'm putting my document together, and then certainly the referral then on to Simon to then complete the estate planning side of it. And certainly, so there's a lot of synergies between the two of us, and a lot of contact, certainly when we're putting an advice document together.
Alrighty. We're coming up just to 11:15. We're going to have a bit of a break here for a music track. You're with Bob Burkhead on Breezy, 2WSRFM 99.7, and I hope you are enjoying the program. And after this, we'll be back with both Simon and Michael, and we'll continue our discussion about estate planning. Rejoining me in the studio once again, we have Michael Schnabel from Sanctuary Financial Services based down there at Engadine, and Simon Bennett from South Waters Legal, who are based out at Cronulla. Come back to me, guys. We're back on air again.
Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome. We've been talking a little bit about the composition of a properly constituted estate plan and its importance in the overall financial plan. Simon, what are some of the things that can go wrong if people don't get it right?
Yeah. Look, there's a plethora of problems that can occur if people don't do effective estate planning. Estate planning involves more than just a will, as Michael said right at the start. One of the things a lot of people don't think about is incapacity. Now, with incapacity, in New South Wales at least, we've got to look at three distinct areas. One, your legal and financial decisions. And most people will have heard of granting someone a power of attorney. What a lot of people don't do, and unfortunately what I see a lot of, is people come in and say, yeah, I've got my husband and my wife as my attorney, I've appointed them. And I say, okay, well, you're both the same age. What happens if you're both sick? We haven't appointed anyone. So what would happen then is you have to go to a government body called the Guardianship Tribunal, and you have to apply to be the person to manage them. Now, beyond just applying, you then get audited on every cent you spend on their behalf, and you have to keep every single receipt. I had this dear old lady once who went and bought the newspaper every day for her husband and had to keep that $1 receipt, collect them all for the end of the month, send them off to the Guardianship Tribunal to show that she wasn't doing the wrong thing. Now, a lot of people don't realise power of attorney does not cover your personal health and medical decisions. That's governed by what's called an enduring guardianship. Enduring guardianship is very important as well. That'll tell people who can manage your decisions with doctors, hospitals, nurses. I'm myself one of 7 children, and I think to myself quite often, if anything happened with my mother, I've got 5 sisters, I can see them straight away saying, Mum told me this once, well she told me this, and she told me that. Whereas if we've got it in writing and it's nice and neat in a document, we can clearly see what she wanted and it's written down, and it can go so far as to say about how you feel about life support. So it's quite a vital document. And finally, as I mentioned before, with the complications, we've got issues around a family trust or a company or self-managed super fund. If you don't have the right person controlling those entities, the assets which they hold may pass through to the wrong people. So it is vitally important that we cover those things. And I suppose if we look at the other side, on the death side, we've got 3 issues there as well, which involves your will, and which can be done in a very effective way or an ineffective way. We've got your superannuation, which we talked about before, is not automatically covered by your will. And because it's not automatically covered by your will, you need to make a separate nomination for that. It's almost like a will for your super. And then again, we've got separate entities. You mentioned before about working in conjunction, financial planner, and that's why I like working with Michael. Michael might give me a call, and I'll just give you a quick example. I've set myself up with some life insurance, and I've got 3 young, beautiful children and my darling wife. If I set up my will effectively through the use of what's called a testamentary trust, which offers both asset protection and taxation benefits for my family, and I've got the life insurance policy that will pay through to that testamentary trust, on today's tax values, it would probably save my family $30,000 a year in tax. Now, if Michael wouldn't call me with a client like that and just said, oh, we'll just nominate your wife, that's effectively $30,000 a year he could be costing that client moving forward. Right. So it is vitally important that we work in conjunction with each other.
Yeah. I suppose that the point you make about an enduring guardianship, there would be a lot of people out there that probably don't understand the significance of that. And I suppose one of the messages that you're wanting to get out is just don't rely upon a straight-out power of attorney, because it can, as you say, cause significant problems.
Yeah, it can cause huge problems. I remember a situation a few years ago where there was a client who wasn't happy with the standard of care being provided to their parents. Unfortunately, they didn't have any documents which allowed them to make decisions on behalf of their parents. They went down there and said, look, we want to get our parents out of here. The parents had dementia, so they weren't in a position to make a decision for themselves. And the nursing home said, well, no, unless you've got the power to do so, we're not releasing this person. So that person, they then had to go to the guardianship tribunal. If you're very, very lucky, you've got probably a 6-week wait to get into the guardianship tribunal.
Yeah. I'm certainly aware, not through any of our family members, but through relations that found themselves involved with the guardianship tribunal, and it was quite traumatic in terms of the problems that they had to go through in terms of accounting basically for every cent that had been spent.
Yeah, and you can imagine this is an extremely traumatic time for a family. We've got a relative or a loved one who's very unwell, and then you've got added burden on top of that. It's just unnecessary. If you do a little bit of planning, estate planning in many respects is like insurance. And no one wants their house to burn down, but we have insurance for it. No one wants to pass away or become incapacitated, but you need your legal documents in place for those events.
Yep. Now, Michael, if we have a little bit of a recap of what we've covered here this morning, it's been a very rewarding session, I've found. From your point of view, just a bit of a recap and some solutions there that you might think.
Look, I'd certainly like to thank Simon for coming along and having a talk today. He's certainly an expert in that area, and we quite often use Simon and his firm for estate planning needs and certainly problems that we come up against. I think certainly estate planning is an integral part and a major part of the planning that we put together, as important as the financial planning side and the income and the insurance side of things. And certainly, I've spoken with Simon, and I think for listeners of 2SSR RFM, we'd certainly like to offer a review, a complimentary review of their estate planning and financial planning needs.
Right.
If they'd like to contact the office, either through Simon at Southern Waters Legal down at Cronulla, or Sanctuary Financial at Engadine.
Okay, so we got phone numbers there on Southern Waters Legal at Cronulla, Michael? Simon, sorry?
Yeah, look, you can call our office on 9523 5535. That's 9523 5535, and we'd definitely like to help people out.
All right. And Michael, from Sanctuary down there at the beautiful